Welcome to City of Keene in Focus. Thanks so much for listening. Good morning. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. My name is Asa Kramer, and I am here with our city manager, Elizabeth Dragon.
Hi, Asa. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing this Friday morning?
I'm doing great. It's Friday.
Good. It's exciting. So last night was City Council, and there was a lot of topics discussed and a lot of good conversation.
So last night we started with some recognition, and we had many of our election workers and volunteers to come forward and receive a proclamation from the mayor. So that was nice to see, and it just a nice reminder of how many people volunteer in this community and what it takes to pull off something like an election process.
I feel like especially this last presidential election had awesome turnout. One of the wards saw close to 90% turnout. That is a huge lift for these people that are volunteering and working at our elections. So.
Yeah, a huge lift. So it's really nice that we get an opportunity to recognize them. And so that was a nice way to start the meeting last night. And then we had a presentation last night from Mary Bruner. She is our senior planner, and she gave us an update regarding the master plan process. The master plan process has been going on for a while now, and we're actually getting ready to move into drafting action steps. And so early December, we have some additional committees that will be working on this, and we've broken into groups, and we'll start looking at what some strategies might be.
One of the things that Mary brought up was they have introduced these online discussion boards where they're looking for feedback from the community on certain topics, and those are available at keenemasterplan.com, as well as the Community Development Department will have office hours at the Keene Public Library in early December, where if you don't have a computer, you don't have regular access to a computer, they will have computers set up where you can participate in the online discussion board. So just a plug for that.
Yeah, I mean, they've really done a great job at trying to engage the public in a variety of ways, whether it's a meeting where we're inviting people to come in, or an online forum where we're asking for their input, or us just going to different locations. So kudos to Mary and her team for the work that they've been doing engaging the public. I think they're doing a great job. So last night on communications, we only had one communication. So this was a letter from Councillor Williams. This letter was referred to our Planning, License, and Development Committee. And right now that next committee is scheduled for December 11th. So this letter was about the discharge of fireworks. And we've had a lot of conversation at the council level about what's the right number of firework displays in the community, and where should they be located? And, should they all be at the alumni field? Is that fair to the people who live there? And so Councillor Williams is asking for a policy to be created. And so there'll be a lot of conversation at the committee about the right number of firework displays, the locations, and whether or not there are other locations in the city where we may be able to hold firework displays. So that will be at PLD on December 11th. And then we moved into actions of the committees, and we had a few. The first one was related to the 30th anniversary celebration for the release of the film Jumanji. So they got their license last night. They went to committee and talked about their event. What happens is once an item is at the committee level, there's a recommendation from the committee that moves forward to the full council. So last night was the final action on that, granting them the license to hold that celebration, and that will be in April. And then there was a report related to a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance, and this was proposed by Jared Goodell, and it was related to side setbacks. There was a conversation at the committee level about what the right process was for this. What was decided is that this action was to accept it as informational, and the proper process would be for Mr. Goodell to complete a petition to actually propose the amendment. And so I know that he has done that. And then we had a accept as informational from a presentation from Kenneth Cost related to mixed-use development on Gilboa Ave. And basically, when we're accepting as something as informational, there's no action that's being taken on the item right now, but that doesn't mean there won't be some follow-up later. This Gilboa Ave conversation is something we definitely will be following up on. The question is, what's the best use for the Gilboa Ave property? And Kenneth Cost was talking not only about the city's property on Gilboa Ave, but private property and what we might imagine for that area. I did send along this information to Mary Bruner, the senior planner, to say, we should really think about once the master plan process is complete, because that's a huge lift for that department right now. Once that's complete, maybe there's some sort of initiative that we should take related to planning for Gilboa Ave. So last night, that was accepted as informational by the city council. And then I think the majority of the meeting was about the rules of order last night.
Yeah, that was a big chunk of the meeting.
And so the rules of order are the city council's rules on how they will process requests from the public and how they will interact with each other. And every year, the city council takes a look at their rules of order to determine if there's need for amendment. And this year, they've been working on amendments since January.
Yeah, they've been really, really examining the current rules of order and seeing what needs to be dusted off. And they've been putting a lot of time into it.
They really have. And I think they're closing in, which is good because we're almost to January to start again. But I think they're down to the last couple of rules. One of the things that came out last night was a conversation about having a workshop with the city council just to talk about what do the different rules mean and how might they be used? And I think everybody at the council last night was interested in having that workshop. So that I think will happen sometime in January. Maybe the most beneficial thing that could happen at that meeting is just some examples, right, of what if this happens? What are the options for the council? And when do they do a point of order? What does that mean? So there's lots of things I think that they could just experiment with and talk about. So I think it will be really helpful. And then the next item on the agenda was the acceptance of donations. And so this I talked about on our last podcast is our holiday family sponsorship. Again, just a great initiative led by our Human Services Office, Natalie Darcy and her team. And they just do a great job accepting donations from city employees. Some people just give money and some people go out and buy the presents and wrap them and then bring them down to Human Services. And then Human Services gives those presents to families in need. And so it's just a really great initiative. And then last night, they adopted or approved the cable franchise agreement. This is a 20-year agreement. There's not a lot of changes in the agreement, but one of the things that's interesting about this agreement is it allows us to collect a franchise fee. Right now, it's a 3.5% franchise fee. Those revenues are used to, do what we're doing right now. Reach out to the public, broadcast our meetings, and also support the efforts of a public station over at the library so that public content can be created and put out as well. So happy to have that franchise agreement finalized and us moving forward for the next 20 years. And then next on the agenda, we had a presentation from a resident, an employer, a downtown business about parking. Her letter was about parking fees, but really it was so much more than that. It was about just the parking system in general and resident parking programs, employee parking programs, enforcement. When do you have enforcement? Lots of really good questions that we will continue to talk about, and there'll be more brought forward to the committee in the future on this item. And then the council approved the new policy related to release of non-public minutes. So the legislature made a change to the process to release non-public minutes, and towns and cities quickly went about creating policies to make sure that we were in compliance with that change. But it did cause some confusion. So we tried to do it the way that we had crafted it the first time. We actually got ourselves into a bit of a jam. So the city clerk clerk and the city attorney worked on amending that policy and to make it clear that the city council would be reviewing non-public minutes that are 10 years old. So 10 years or older, but once you're on this schedule, it's automatically at the 10-year mark. They'd be reviewed to determine if the reason for sealing them still exists or if they can now be released. And so hopefully that will make it clear moving forward.
I'm always really impressed by just the promptness of response because, yeah, with new changes, there's going to be some growing pains. But I feel like the charter officers all pivoted really quick and the council all pivoted really quick to be like, okay, we ran into a problem. How do we fix it? So I think it's a good testament to a good response.
Yeah, I agree. And we hardly ever get it perfect the first time out, especially when we're trying something new. And so it's important to just continue to evaluate it and see if it's working and then adjust as you move forward. And that's exactly what happened here. Next on the agenda, we talked about the Keene's transfer station contract for transportation disposal. So this is also an item that got a little bit of attention last night, but it's a big item for the transfer station. We have an agreement with Waste Management, and they haul from our transfer station, and our agreement, actually, I think it expires in December. So we had to go out to bid again for another agreement. So we did a request for proposals. We only received one bid, and it was from Waste Management again. And there was a lot of conversation, or some conversation last night about, why aren't we getting more bids on this? And the number of haulers that can, number one, handle the waste that's coming out of the transfer station. Number two, have a place to put it. And then just three, can competitively bid. There's not a lot. There's a couple of really big waste haulers. The other one, there's two. It's Casella and Waste Management. And whatever reason, Casella decided not to bid. And so we are moving forward with negotiations with Waste Management. And that contract will be for 5 years with some additional options to renew. But the cost is going up, and we knew it would be going up. We're just under $90 a ton, I believe, right now. And it's going up to, depending on how we structure the agreement, between 100 or 105 per ton. As our landfills in the state continue to fill up and options become more difficult to find for disposal, that cost is going to continue to go up. So it's really important that we recycle and reduce waste as much as we can. And, our transfer station does a great job. They are always looking for ways to reduce the waste stream, and it's going to become more and more important as we move into the future. They also approved the 2025 Flyover and City-Based Map Update project. So every 5 years, we do a flyover on that second round. So once every 10 years, we do a more detailed flyover. And this is the information that's used to create all the maps that we use. So the tax maps, the maps that we use in public works when we're doing projects. And it's really important information to have that up to date. Assessing even uses it. It's something that planning and zoning uses when we look at setbacks, when we look, there's a measuring tool on there. It's very, very powerful. I don't think the average person realized just how much detail is on our website related to properties and topography, building layout, all of that. So that's moving forward. That contract will be negotiated, and then we will schedule the flyover. I think it's probably going to be in the spring, although I'm not 100% sure.
Definitely need some social media videos from the helicopter.
Asa, that's a great idea.
Really, I just want to ride in the helicopter.
That's right, yeah.
I can, of course. But.
Yeah. Then last night, we did the tax deeding, and, it's always really tough to do a tax deeding. And a tax deeding occurs when someone is 3 years or more behind on their taxes. And I will give a shout out for the Revenue Office and the Assessing Office. They worked really hard to get that list down and get people on payment plans if they were behind. And so we had, I don't even know how many people are initially on that list, but it was a very long list. And last night it was down to 4 properties. two of them were pieces of land. And then we made an amendment at the meeting because we had a last minute payment arrangement. So now we're down to 3. That was a lot of progress for the revenue office and, great work getting people on payment plans and helping them through this. Last night was during manager's comments. I didn't have a ton to talk about. I talked about the initiative, this right here, this initiative to create bios. Yeah, I wanted the council to know, and I also wanted the public to know, because basically you said, we had 4 people listen last week.
I know. Famous.
Yeah. So we're hoping we get more than 4 as we move forward.
We'll see.
But we have to let people know it's out there, right? So they don't know.
It's new.
It's new. And then I also talked about our intranet, and you're working on this.
I am, yeah. Our new intranet employee portal.
Yeah. I'm excited about that.
Me too. So yeah, we're hoping that it will be a good update. It'll be a little more user-friendly and just a little freshen up.
And then last night I let the council know of a change here at the city. Will Schaffman, who we were just talking about, does a great job with our GIS services. We have so much capability. Actually, we don't use it enough, to be honest. There's so much that we could use the GIS information for. I'll just give one example of a project we did, and it was couple years ago. I was looking at the fire department and the location of Station 2, which is in West Keene, and we were trying to determine if Station 2 was in fact in the right location. Where's the best location for Station 2 according to the calls that they're responding to, how long it takes them to get there. And so Will, actually working with IT, helped us locate all the calls that we had. So using real data, located them on the map, and then we could download the information about the time of the call to get an estimated time of arrival. Just really powerful information. When we use information in that way to help us make a decision, it's such an improvement to the process and a much more informed decision. That's just one small example of how the GIS services was used for that project, but it could be used for so many other things. And then last night I also mentioned during manager's update, every once in a while we get a discount for something, and everybody loves a discount.
Love a discount.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about the NHMA and UNH Carsey School of Public Policy partnership. So because the City of Keene is a member of NHMA, which is the New Hampshire Municipal Association, anyone who works for the city or an elected official at the city is eligible for a discount. So it's a 12% discount right out of the gate, but then you have the opportunity to get up to 20%. So there's an additional 8% discount that they are offering if you successfully complete NHMA certificate training or webinars. And so, I think it's a great opportunity. Then last night, we had some reports from our boards and commissions that were referred to different committees. There was a report from the Conservation Commission regarding invasive species, and I believe it was referred to MSFI. And then there was a sign code modification. Now, this is something that came in from the mayor. The mayor had spoken with a business owner who doesn't operate in the downtown. This business is more on the fringe of the downtown area. They want to use blade signs. Our sign code doesn't allow it. From the mayor's perspective, he understood why we didn't allow that use of blade signs in the downtown, but wondered about the locations that are a bit removed from the downtown. And so he wrote a letter asking for that to be amended, that sign code. So that will be referred to PLD first for a conversation. And then if the PLD committee and ultimately the council is in support of changing that, there will be a process for an amendment to the code. Then we had a resignation from the Partner City Committee last night that they accepted, and we'll be looking for someone to fill that spot. They also gave more time to an item related to licenses and permits. This was a conversation we had at PLD, and it was as we started to talk about, well, what's the intent of this change in the ordinance? And basically it was to address the upcoming downtown infrastructure project and how to handle license applications in the sections of the downtown that are going to be impacted. And the end result of that conversation at committee was to put this item on more time because it wasn't ready for prime time. There were a lot of questions, and we didn't quite have it the way that we needed. The reason for that is it didn't give enough flexibility. The committee, the council members on the committee, they are interested in giving as much flexibility as possible to downtown businesses. So they really just don't want a one-size-fits-all. And so we have to find a way to put some language in to allow flexibility. Let's say, for example, it's the first phase of the project, which will be around Central Square. That's going to impact those outside dining areas. And instead of just saying, no, there's no license for this one season, there's a possibility that we can find a way to have licenses for a couple days a week or on the weekend. The council wants us to go back and think about this and see if we can come up with something that will allow more flexibility, because obviously we want to support the downtown throughout this project and be as flexible as we possibly can. Then next on the agenda is that ordinance I mentioned earlier. So Jared Goodell, business owner and resident in the community, is proposing a change to the zoning ordinance, and he did go ahead and create his petition, and that was on the agenda last night for first reading. And then towards the end of the agenda, we had items related to resolutions. And so these resolutions are related to retirements, policies, and appropriation of funds. The first one is appropriation of funds from the solid waste fund to the operating budget. Now, the solid waste fund, like the parking fund, they're separate. They are entirely supported by the activities of that division. So parking meter revenues, they stay with the parking fund. Solid waste, transfer station revenues, they stay with the solid waste fund. And like the parking fund, they don't receive general fund support. So that means they're not impacting the tax rate or the general budget. They are just a user fee. So last night, the Public Works Department had requested that some of the money from that fund be used to change a 10-hour part-time employee to a full-time employee. And it's just because of the activity at the transfer station, the amount of work, the number of cars that we're seeing come through. I think it was between 300 to 400 cars in a day, and even more than that on the weekends.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a very, very busy place up there. And so the council approved this appropriation, and will make that change to the employee who was working for us part-time. He will now become a full-time member of that department. And then on the agenda, we had an appreciation of Patty Gagnon on her retirement. She's the police department. This is an interesting process the council uses. They start with this resolution. So when someone's retiring, the department will work with the HR department to draft a resolution about their time here, things that they've done, just accomplishments, and just to really celebrate that employee. And then it gets placed on the council's agenda under resolutions. Usually Tom Powers, the chair of finance, will talk about that resolution. Last night, he was not here, so Councilor Remy tried to walk in his shoes and do it for him. He did a great job. It's a nice opportunity. The councilor just goes through whoever's presenting, what's in the resolution, and just a quick summary of their time here. And then what happens is we arrange for the employee, and not everybody wants to do this, by the way. Not everybody wants to come back in, but we arrange for the employee to come back and then have that resolution presented to him or her, and then they'll have an opportunity to say a few words if they want. It's just a nice thing for the city to recognize and thank our employees for their work here at the city and the time that they have devoted. And then the last resolution was related to Class 6 roads and private roads. This is an interesting one. So the city has been looking at ways to encourage housing development. The city's done a great job changing zoning ordinances to create more densification of the downtown. Recently adopted what's called the Cottage Court overlay, which allows us to have projects in infill land throughout the city and create some more densification, little villages of housing. Last night, this item is also related to housing because we've had a couple of instances where a developer or property owner was interested in doing a housing project, but it was either on a private road or a Class 6 road. And the council had a policy that had been adopted a long time ago. It really needed to be updated. And so the council asked that staff go through and update that policy and make sure it complies with the current state laws, and also to lay out the important things that the city should be thinking about when a request like that comes in. So this is the first step in that process, and we'll see what the committee does with it. In the end, hopefully we'll have a new policy for the council to follow.
And actually, related to that, in talking about the podcast, a question came in, and we were wondering if you wouldn't speak to the housing champions.
Yeah, so the state of New Hampshire, through Invest NH program, last year was the first year they had a pot of money available for housing projects. There was a variety of ways to access those funds, and the city of Keene has done a great job accessing those funds, both for the work that we do here at the city and looking at our ordinances, but also to support development projects. And one example was or is the 310 Marlborough Street project. We worked with that property owner to access Invest NH funds. So we've been monitoring what's happening with that program, and the state has announced that they are going to have another round. It's not going to look like the first round. They are going to have more money to support housing projects. The way to access it is to become a housing champion. So that is exactly what we're trying to do. So there's an application process. It talks about how much you've done to your zoning ordinance to encourage housing development. Do you provide training to your planning board? What have you been doing to encourage housing in your community? And Mary Bruner and her staff worked to put together that application. It was pretty extensive, but they did it and got it in time. I'm hopeful we will be considered a housing champion, and that will open up the additional Invest NH funds to us to access. And in the past, those funds were being used for gap funding for shovel-ready housing projects. Now the state is supporting investment in infrastructure for housing projects. And I think that's because they received some feedback from the first round that said one of the barriers is having water and sewer and other infrastructure in place, making it difficult and costly to do a housing project. And so they are going to have funding available for housing projects that need that infrastructure money. I went to the New Hampshire Municipal Association conference, and there was a session on this, and the individuals from the Invest NH program was there. So I did go forward and talk to them about what does that mean? What is infrastructure? What qualifies? And they said, it can be under the ground infrastructure, but it also could be parking infrastructure. I think there's some flexibility there.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the first step is becoming a housing champion. And so hopefully we'll hear back from them soon. It was great. They actually reached out to us and said, You're gonna apply, right? The city of Keene's gonna apply.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
It's a great sign. So I'm hoping we get that designation soon. That's the end of the meeting. We didn't have a non-public last night. We did talk a little bit about, after the meeting, we've talked a little bit about the workload coming up for MSFI. So MSFI has quite a bit on their agenda for the next 2 meetings, and we've been trying to find the right date for MSFI. So originally we had thought we were going to be meeting next the week of Thanksgiving on Tuesday, but that has now shifted to December 4th. So the next MSFI meeting is December 4th, and there are many items on there related to parking. There's that speed limit reduction request for Upper Roxbury. There's the continued discussion of the Old Sullivan Road intersection. And there's some additional policies being proposed by Public Works. So right now we're looking at splitting up this workload because the next MSFI meeting,
It will be the 18th.
Yeah.
Yep. At 6 p.m.
Okay. We're looking at splitting up the agenda items between the December 4th and the December 18th MSFI meeting, because we also need to have a conversation with the council about the final design of downtown. And I suspect that will take up most of the December 18th meeting, and so we are looking to get as much off the plate on December 4th as possible. One additional thing, so right before the meeting started last night, I had a conversation with Councilor Greenwald related to the downtown project. And one of the things that he and I have talked about, and the mayor and I have also talked about, is doing a little experiment downtown. And what the idea is to use the sidewalk, probably on a Sunday, for Councilor Greenwald to get on his e-bike and see how fast he can go.
Okay. All right. Okay. I like it. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. Test it.
Yeah. And the reason for that is we've had a lot of conversation at the committee level about should there be a speed limit? How fast can people go? One of the things that we need to take into account is just how many times there's going to be a stop. There's a crossing, a road intersecting. There's lots of places where you have to stop and then start again. Let's try it out. We don't have a date yet. I was talking back and forth with the Public Works Director last night. We're trying to find a date that will work for everyone. He said, maybe we can invite you. We might get a little reel out of this.
Sure, I would love to come.
Facebook reel. And so while we were talking about it, Councillor Haas also might join in on the fun. He's an avid cyclist. He doesn't have an e-bike, so we might try both, right, and see what happens. Stay tuned. We'll get more information on that. And I think that's it. That was all from last night's council meeting. Since we won't be meeting again, we won't be doing another broadcast before, I wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Next week is Thanksgiving, and the city offices are closed on Thursday and Friday. And it's a great time for everyone just to take a little time and spend some time with your family and be thankful for all that we have.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss?
I don't.
All right. Well, yeah, I think that's just about it.
All right, great. Thanks, Asa.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to City of Keene in Focus. We'll see you next time.